Good morning. I'm so excited today. We are chatting with Joneil, the owner of My Living Yoga in Queens. And we are going to chat about owning a studio, what it's like having a studio during a pandemic, and check in with him. My Living is one of our studio partners, and they have copies of our body issue. So we're so excited. You can pick up free copies at all our partner studios. They are on our website. There's a link in our bio, so you can check them out. Please support local yoga studios, small businesses. If you can go in person, if you're more comfortable online, absolutely do that. We want to support these studio owners and these small business owners now more than ever. So thank you for that. And here we go. I see My Living is here. So let's hit the buttons and see if the magic happens. It's always a surprise what we're going to get. All right. Oh. Okay, so full disclosure, I had to tell everyone, I posted this morning. Joneil and I worked together, it feels like a million years ago, like another lifetime ago. I'm still there, but to me, I don't even know where to start because there's so much I want to talk to you about, but I started my post today saying, I remember when everyone, when they leave our company, oh, it's been great, I loved it here, blah, blah, blah. But yours, it was so beautiful. And I screenshot it and I showed it to everyone. And I was like, you were going for your dream and you were going for it. And it was yoga on top of it. And I was like, that is so impressive. So I just had to start by saying that because I was so excited. We reconnected. So welcome, Joneil.
Thank you. It is so good to see you. And I remember you responded to my email and talked about how moving it was for you. And I was like, wow, so you never know. It's like one of those things where you're like, you kind of put it out like as a formality, and you try to make it a little bit personal too. And you never know how it impacts other people until it comes back to you. And so that was so nice when you responded to that with that message. So I was like, oh, thank you. So, yes.
I loved it, and I can't say that enough, especially because you and we worked in news, and that's it's not an easy it's got a lot of challenges, and from news to owning a yoga studio, that's a crazy jump. So, and now you're here and you survived, and I was just like, go. I'm so happy you're here and we're having this conversation, and kudos to you, man. It's just it's just so impressive.
Thank you. And I kind of feel like you're right. It's such a strange jump to make from where I was at before to where I am now. But it's funny because sometimes the universe gives you gifts without you even knowing it, and I don't feel like I could have survived this pandemic without sort of the skills that I picked up as in television news, where things were constantly changing and you had to adapt and you had to meet deadlines and you had to make it work in some way, in some fashion, when it doesn't seem like you're going to make it, but you have to do it, right? Because you have to get something on the air.
Yeah.
And so
just anything.
Just put it out there. And I kind of feel like that kind of fly by the seat of your pants mentality was something that served me really, really well, and continues to serve me well, just because, the last, almost 2 years now, I can't believe it's been almost 2 years. It's been it's been, the change has been, change is always constant, but it's been really constant, more so than usual, I find.
Yeah.
And so, so I was actually really, really grateful for having those skills and that certain skill sets. And I feel like if I wasn't willing to change and adapt, I don't think I could have I could have made it this far, to be honest with you. So.
I love that because I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're right. I mean, there is really, when you work in live television, it's just, it's exactly what you said. Adapt quickly, get it on, because the last thing you want is just nothing on air, So you have to just make something work, and you're forced to think on your feet all the time. And, when business just shifted as quickly as they did, you also probably had a little bit of that, digital skill set as well, and a little bit of that background as well. And I remember you saying in your articles, because you're featured in our body issue as one of the very first articles, because we chatted with you, you shared your story, and you said that you looked around and you kind of saw what was happening in the world. Like, you kind of noticed it, and not a lot of people really, even I, who was still in news, was like, oh, it was just another story, but you were paying attention, and that served you well.
I was like, because it's very obviously, it's very unusual to have entire nations shut down their borders and then shut everything down. And I thought, this is a virus. It doesn't really, it doesn't really care about which border crossing it's going through. It's going to come here eventually, and it's going to create the same kind of havoc that it was creating everywhere else. And I saw how all those other yoga studios were being forced to close, and some of them were, figured out a way to stream their classes online. And I thought that was something that we definitely had to do too. So I was already, January and February, I was already starting to have the conversations with my teachers about, look, this is something that we should probably take seriously, and that, we need to sort of come up with ideas for how to deliver our yoga classes if the physical studio has to close. And and it was actually one of my teachers who suggested Zoom. So she was like, I hear a lot of people saying nice things about Zoom, we should do that. And so I was like, okay, we'll start going down that Zoom road. And we were lucky enough that we were ready for when the poop hit the fan. We were ready for it. We were ready for it. And it was a fairly, and I think that a lot of the people who are our members sort of appreciated that we were thinking about sort of continuing when everything else was getting, the plug pulled. We were able to continue with that.
And so are you still offering your Zoom classes now? Is that right? Because you're fully open now and everything is, and you're still offering the Zoom?
Yeah, so we have almost all of our classes are they're hybrid. They're, while we're teaching them in the studio, people have the option to take it on Zoom. And there's some people who continue to think that, they want to continue practicing at home, either because they like it or because they feel safer. And then other people sort of like having that option. Like, if they can't make it to class in time, they can just fire up the computer. Or, I saw a couple of people over the summer practicing in their backyards, which was kind of nice. It was like, okay, so I think that the Zooming thing, while I think it's an important part of the yoga studio business now. I don't think that it's something that you can entirely ignore now.
Yeah. And thank goodness, it is nice to have all these new tools. And I was chatting with Carolyn, who I see she's here from Bayom Yoga. And we were chatting about how I just love that my personal definition of my yoga space has changed, because I always went to a studio. That was always what I did. It was just a mechanical thing that I always did. And it never really occurred to me to do it in my living room, and then once everything, as you said, the poop hit the fan, I had no choice, and there I was in my living room with my puppy and all these different things, and just trying to adapt and adjust. How has your personal practice changed in the last year? Like,
Well, so it, like with everybody, it suffered a lot. I think that I was practicing, I had a personal practice that I would do every day before the pandemic. And then as things started to change, that was one thing that I would sort of not prioritize, and I would kind of let it go by the wayside and say, oh, I'll make up for it tomorrow. Right. And I think that that was one of the things that was, and I think a lot of people went through that. And so when I started returning to a regular practice, a lot of the things I used to be able to do were much more difficult, you know?
Yeah.
And it was, and, and, and I think that's okay. It took me a while to sort of
Yeah.
accept that's okay. That, you know, that we sometimes, we have this expectation, especially in an asana practice, that, you know, we have to do sort of that best pose all the time,
Mhm.
and we don't have to. Like, our bodies aren't built to do that.
Yeah.
And, you know, you just kind of have to try your best, give it your best effort, and then let go of the results. You know, sometimes you'll hit the target, sometimes you won't. And if you don't
Yeah.
hit the target, there was probably a reason why you didn't hit the target. Like,
Yeah.
it's supposed to, you were not supposed to hit the target at that moment, you know, because
Yeah.
you're supposed to learn something from it. So it's something that, like, I had to work through and sort of accept, and it was like coming back to starting a practice all over again. When I came back after the pandemic, it was like, okay, so I just got to remember what I was, you know, as a beginner, having that mentality that,
Yeah.
you know, you have to sort of be open to what's happening, and you have to sort of accept that change is going to be incremental, and that's okay. It's okay.
And I love that too, because I think, I mean, I know I was hard on myself exactly the same way. I was really hard on myself, and I was like, well, I have a yoga magazine. Like, I can't be not doing yoga. Like, but just like everyone on the planet, you know, I was trying to process all these things the best way I could, you know, and even though yoga has always been a comfort and a place of, you know, rest and peace and joy, for some reason, I just couldn't even wrap my head around it. You know, it was I just needed to just sit, you know, and then when I did resume the practice again, it was very restorative. It was just a lot of gentle stretching and a lot of just, you know, and I just kept thinking, just be kind to yourself, because I was beating myself up for a long time. And I was like, and then I would beat myself up about beating myself up. You know, I was like, well, then do it. But, you know, I do. But this is, you know, the things we had to go through, I feel
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly humbling, you know, to think, you know, you've been practicing X many years, and that you can go back to day one and step one like that, you know, and that's actually a really good gift, you know?
Yeah. 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 I mean, and that's part of like, we forget that that's part of the practice also, right? Like, that learning from, understanding that our practice, our bodies, our lives change, and that, you know, we should have enough tools to sort of adapt with it. Like, the practice gives us all sorts of options and tools that we can use,
Yeah.
depending on what our bodies rely on. And it's just going back to something you said a little bit earlier about how, you know, learning, like, you used to go to yoga studios all the time for your classes, right? And then when we were closed, you couldn't do that. And I think that, you know, it sort of made me realize that yoga studios are kind of like in a weird business where, if we're doing our job properly, our students leave us. You know, like, they learn
Yeah.
the practice on their own, and they
Yeah.
learn to practice on their own. And if
Yeah.
we're doing our jobs well, they're able to go out and practice yoga wherever they need to. You
Yeah.
know?
Great point.
Yeah.
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 I love that. I love that. So how is it now? Do you feel like, you know, are you back to sort of full capacity? I know there's a lot of restrictions and limitations with class sizes now. Do you feel, you know, do you feel like it's getting back to normal? Do you feel like there's still a little bit of a ways to go in terms of in-class attendance now?
So our attendance, we're not, well, first of all, we're not back to a full schedule yet, because
Yeah.
I think there's still a population of people out there who are, still a little bit hesitant to go and do indoor classes, and
Yeah.
that's okay. Like, that's completely, like, understandable. And so, we're not at, like, we don't have the, we have, like, I would say we're probably at about 75% of our schedule
That's
that we were
good.
pre-pandemic, which is still pretty good. And
Yeah.
our attendance numbers have been sort of steadily creeping up,
Mhm.
since we reopened in March. And but in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking this can be yanked away at any
Yeah.
day. So I have to sort of be grateful for that,
Yeah.
and kind of, like, accept that might happen.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of, like, the people, that our classes, you know, many of our classes are pretty full now, and we don't have any sort of attendance restrictions anymore, other than sort of what is physically capable, other than how many people we can physically pack here. So, but in New York, we're everybody who comes in has to be partially or fully vaccinated against COVID-19. So that I think adds a level of safety or feeling of safety for people who come in. And I think, and I'm very fortunate, I think, that people sort of see how seriously we take that disease, and that we're taking every step that we possibly can to keep everyone safe. And I think that helps give people a certain level of comfort, enough for them to want to come back.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I mean, that's exactly what it is. People, they're uncomfortable, they're unsure, and we're all feeling our way through this still. 2 years later, I can't even believe we're saying this, but we're still, I feel like, a little bit in the dark about everything. But I loved one of the things you had also said about your community in the article was, I said, one of the questions I asked was, what surprised you the most? And you were just like, the outpouring of support. People continued their memberships. People, kept showing up in terms of how they could support you. And I love that. I love when I hear that, because sometimes when you're going through these things, maybe you feel a little bit alone, or you feel like, oh God, I'm the only person there, or I don't have any support. And then all of a sudden, you see it and you read it, and that must have been an amazing feeling.
It really was. And I think that was sort of like a testament to, the teachers here creating sort of that spirit of community, and also to our members who, who many of whom had been practicing here for years, and it was something that was really, really important to them, to make sure that, like, the studio was able to see the other side, and would survive out of it. And I think that even the people who couldn't continue their memberships, they were sending me, notes about how grateful they were, and how their lives were transformed by the studio. And they were sending me like leads about, oh, have you heard about this grant? Have you heard about this loan? Things like that, where we're, and then just, there were, every time we sort of like put out a call for help, like, guys, here's a t-shirt sale, this will help us. All the support and the love came in. And I think that was something that was just really, really touching. And knowing how important the studio was to the community, I felt like I had to keep it going. It wasn't something that I couldn't just like, I saw how important it was to people. I couldn't just kind of abandon it. It had to continue.
I was asking Carolyn, and I asked a few people this question, because I'm curious, just from a selfish perspective, how do people get through something like this? Like, was it a mantra? Was it just meditation? Was it like, what was the one thing that you could always go back to that would just kind of like, when you were like, oh, I can't do this anymore, and you would just kind of like, a thought, a person, a thing? What was that one thing?
Well, I was, so I'm gonna name two things. I'm sorry.
Better.
So I think I was really blessed and fortunate to have a husband who really believed in the mission of the studio also, and so I had him as a backstop always. And then the second thing was I would sort of fall back on my default meditation technique, which is third eye meditation, where I would, just close my eyes and sort of wait for whatever visions or images the universe wants to send me at that moment to send it to me. And that was the thing where, like, whenever I felt lost or I needed some kind of direction, I would just kind of sit for 5 or 10 minutes and just see what kinds of messages I would receive. So that was something that was very, very helpful in terms of going through some of the difficulties.
And I love that. I mean, like you said, 5-10 minutes, you didn't have to sit, and this is one of the things that we're always trying to talk about and celebrate and explore is in terms of yoga and meditation, it's so different and so personal for everyone. So it's not necessarily sitting by yourself on a mountain, for hours on end. It could be, just like you said, 5-10 minutes, just regrouping, just opening your mind, and that is something that I think is accessible to most people 5-10 minutes, I think most people have that. And that's something you were doing like on a daily basis, pretty much, it sounds like.
I was doing that before the pandemic. I was doing that on a daily basis. And then
Yeah.
during the pandemic, whenever I sort of felt like I needed to draw myself back in,
Yeah.
that was a technique that I would always do, because it's so simple and it's so easy. You just sit and you close your eyes and then, just watch that space between your
Yeah.
eyebrows to find out like whatever messages or visions or images will arrive.
Is that how you made the transition? So there must have been that moment when you were in your, I always say past life, like your past career, I guess, and then you were transitioning to your new career. Was it through that meditation where you said, I'm going to go for this? Like, how did because I feel like there's always like a click, there's like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And then you just do it. How
You
did you
know,
get over that?
it was, it was, I think it was like, it was just one of those. So I never had like a 5-year plan where like I'm gonna get my yoga
Right.
studio, at this point or whatnot. It was just, it was one of those things where yoga just became a bigger and bigger part of my life with every year, and I saw how good it was for me, and I just thought, it'd be kind of interesting to take over a yoga or buy a yoga studio or start your own yoga studio.
Right.
And so, I it would just, and then I had been going to this studio, just a little bit of a backing up a little bit. This studio opened in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started coming here around 2015, became a teacher a couple years later. And, it was just, I randomly just was like, when I was having these thoughts about like, oh, maybe
Right.
I can do this. Like, I just kind of approached the owner at the time and said, if you're ever interested in, taking over or in sort of selling the studio, I would be somebody who would be interested in
Yeah.
purchasing it. And, and it just so happened that, that was kind of like the time when she was going through certain changes in her life as well.
Yeah.
So it was almost like, I was getting
Yeah.
to this step and then she was getting to this step, and it just kind of
Yeah.
like, it made sense,
Yeah.
and so, and then we just did it. She was like, okay, I've thought about it. I think that, she didn't want to do it at first, but I think after some reflection and after some, because, as a
Right.
yoga studio owner, this is like, as she put it, this was like her first child.
Oh, I get it.
And,
Yeah.
and now that I'm the owner here, it does feel like a first child sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I completely understood I understand where she's coming from, where she had come from now. And, but I think she realized that like, her life was moving in a different direction, and she didn't want her baby to sort of fall into the wrong hands. And I
Yeah.
think that the fact that I was already here, I was a member of the community,
Yeah.
it just made sense that I could sort of, be its next caretaker. And I was very fortunate that she trusted me with that.
I love that. I love that vision. It's like a passing of the baton, It was like she was ready to hand it over and you were ready to receive it, and it all just worked
Yeah.
out. It's so beautiful. I love it.
It's amazing how that often it works out that way, right? Like what you need, the universe gives to you. So it's like you just kind of have to trust it.
And I think, and to be fair though, and when that happens to people, you were really preparing for it. It sounds like it was something that you were approaching in a very calm, sort of accepting way, and when I just had a flashback. I remember when you were trying to get your teacher or trainer, you were in the middle of it and you did a practice class in the studio. Do you remember this? This was, I don't know how many years ago. And we did it in one of the studios after the show. And it was like me and like 5 other people. We rolled out our mats, and so I love that. I just had that memory pop into my head. But you kind of you didn't do both at the same time, right? You kind of like ended one, you ended your job and then started the yoga studio, or did you sort of overlap a little bit?
Well, no, it was, so I had been, so while I was teaching part-time, essentially, I was teaching here,
Right.
teaching a couple of classes here while I was still working at CBS. And then, but then eventually it was like, once I saw that this was going to happen in terms of taking over the studio, I felt like I had to sort of give it all of my attention. And you know, as you know,
Mhm.
I'm sure like as working in that industry, along with having a magazine on the other on the other, like I don't know how you do it. I
I
don't
don't
know
know
how you
either.
do it.
I
But
really
like
don't know.
I, but like you know, I feel like yes. So I basically I quit. I resigned from CBS, and then you know, 2 months later, I took full ownership of the studio, and it was, and then it's been kind of like full on running 100% since then.
Wow. I love that. So inspirational. Thank you so much, Joneil. And I love that you're still standing. The studio is still standing, and you have gone through it. You've gone through the fire 12 times, and your studio is still thriving. And I am so excited. And you have a workshop coming up this weekend. Is that right?
That's right. So we have, speaking of the body issue, and I know you guys had a trans yoga article in that magazine.
Yeah, Daniel. Yeah,
Magazine. So we, Ale K,
yeah.
who is a trans teacher based out of North Carolina. So we
That's
did our
right.
500 hour yoga training um, 2 years ago together. And
Yeah.
so he's coming into New York, and he does a lot of sort of body positivity yoga workshops. And
Amazing.
somebody who, you know, lived most of his life not feeling comfortable in his own
Mm.
skin, and to a degree that I don't think most people can appreciate, you
Yeah.
know. So yoga has been so important for him in his journey into sort of accepting himself
Yeah.
and finding, you know, his true self. And so he's going to share some of those tools with us this weekend.
Oh wow.
And 2 hour workshop, mantras, a little gentle yoga, some community building. It's going to be loads of fun, I think, and very, very inspirational.
I love that. And especially, I mean, I think, you know, when we were creating the body issue, there was not one person that we spoke to that didn't have something with their body. You know, I don't want to say an issue because it's a loaded word, but they had I don't even know what the right word was. Everyone has thoughts about their body. I guess maybe that's the
Yeah,
best way to put it.
yeah, yeah.
You know, it's not a sort of neutral ground for a lot of people. I notice that as I get older, a lot of those seem to change and maybe go away. Maybe new ones come in, but it's kind of a universal thing. And so I love that you're offering an entire weekend that it's tools, you know, that anyone can use. And so that's so important, especially now, especially with something like a, a virus that's out there. You know, it adds this other level. You know, all our bodies have changed, I think, during the pandemic. And so, like, I know some people that started working out more. You know, Frances, who's here, has become like a beast. She's incredible. You know, she does these workouts every single day, and that's how she's coping with things. You know, I became a sloth. You know, I was like just kind of laying on my back. But I think it's so timely to focus now more than ever on our bodies and how and healing. You know, it's just the more tools we have are always, you can't have too many tools for healing.
No,
So thank you for
and
offering that. And so people can sign up on your website.
that's right. They just go to our website, mylivingyoga.com, click
Great.
on workshops, and it's right there. You can sign up right on our website.
I love it. Thank you, Joneil. I'm going to post this on our page so people know where to find you. And I hope our paths cross again soon.
Yes,
And I'm so inspired and have always been inspired by everything you do. So thank you.
it is so nice to see you again, Yana, and thank you so
Yes.
much for giving me this platform. This is a beautiful magazine. I love this issue, and given that it took you 2 years to put it together, it turned out wonderfully. It's a
I,
beautiful, you know. Speaking of, like, you know, COVID bodies, right?
yeah.
There's so much of the discourse was about like how, you know, our body, we sort of let ourselves go.
Yeah.
And it's so nice to have sort of a counter narrative to that, that there's so many ways to think about our bodies and changing,
Yeah.
and how that's not always a bad thing. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's okay. And I think that we need more of that. We always need that, you know.
100%. I think that's the takeaway I've had from the last 2 years is it's okay. It's going to be okay.
It's going to
So,
be okay.
thank you, Joneil. Best of luck with your
All right.
workshop this weekend.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much, Yana. Bye.
Bye.